Welcome, everybody. We are going to get rolling here. Friday afternoon, right after lunch. Football game tonight, baseball game tonight. Bigger football game tomorrow, undefeated team tomorrow. A lot going on. But it's great to see everybody. Again, Friday afternoon. Wonderful. Welcome to Modular Construction and Utah's Housing Future. I'm Dave Andersonn. I'm the Community Development Director for Spanish Fork City. I couldn't be happier than I am to introduce our presenters today. Closest to me is Alex Walsh. Alex is an architect with EV Studio that focuses on integrating architecture with structural, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and civil engineering into a single team. He has strong interest in off-site construction that he believes will help lower the cost of construction and increase the speed and quality of new construction. He and his team work on several projects across the country that range from accessory dwelling units to single-family residences to duplexes and townhomes and even 100-plus unit apartment complexes. Alex also works on commercial projects for quick-serve restaurants. Alex is a licensed architect and tends to have a focus towards construction and detail coordination at multiple phases for projects. Alex, great to have you with us today. Next is Cam Algardsen. Cam is a fourth-generation modular builder. He holds a bachelor's degree in construction management from Brigham Young University. He worked in the modular construction business as a young man, building, delivering, and setting modules. After earning his degree, Cam spent several years managing production home building and land development in Las Vegas, Nevada, which experience he brings to the modular industry. He has been in leadership at Irontown Modular for the last 15 years and has provided hundreds of modules all over the western United States. Cam loves traveling, spending time in the outdoors, in service to the community, and spending time with his amazing wife and 5 children. On the end, Bryant Kanan. Bryant has a diverse background in architectural design and construction. He spent his first years working with Derek Wade Architecture in Frisco, Colorado. His training and experience inspired him to design and build his first major project, a spacious and efficient mountain home for himself and his family. Since then, well over 100 of his design projects have been completed. Working as a freelance contractor for the past 10 years, he has gained extensive experience in modular design and construction. He also currently works with Irontown Modular of Spanish Fork, Utah, as a design and project coordinator, where he was a previous employee. Bryant's strengths lie in his careful planning and attention to design detail. He thrives on problem solving and making things fit together in harmonious, aesthetic, and efficient ways. Once again, appreciate everybody being here today. We appreciate our presenters. Thank you, gentlemen. Would you like questions to be held until the end, or if they come up, is that better?
Yeah, probably.
Okay,
Probably.
so we anticipate having some time for Q&A at the end. And with that being said, Alex, I'll turn things over to you.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Alex. I'm a licensed architect with EV Studio. We're based out of Denver, Colorado. We bring together every discipline involved for buildings, and we really work a lot on off-site construction in my team. I wanted to start off first by talking about general off-site construction. We're going to focus a lot on what's called volumetric modular. It's really a three-dimensional object that's crafted off-site and finished to a good level of detail and brought to the site in order to be set and finished, but there are a couple other options, including some panelized and concrete options as well. But for this presentation, we'll focus on the volumetric modular portion of it. So I want to start off by saying that commonly when people think of modular, it's usually looking at it from the perspective of a very large box-like structure or the trailer home kind of appearance that most people think of when they think of a manufactured housing. The reality is that those are different construction practices than what modular is. modular is really based a lot off of standard construction practices and ends up leading to more unique buildings that end up being hard to tell were actually modular at the end of the day. Introduces a lot of different opportunities that you can get to in order to get a different kind of building that doesn't have to be the standard thought of what a modular building is. In reality, it's a construction practice, and it's designed to try to bring as many trades off the site as possible and try to increase the speed of construction on the site so that there's less disruption to the community as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process. With EV Studio, we handle everything, but this presentation is going to focus more towards the front-end planning, pre-design discussion. It's going to look more at the kind of things that you should really think about when it comes to a modular project from a planning lens as opposed to construction that we're usually presenting in. So I wanted to start off first by saying that this is going to be a fairly standard process. We still have to go through all the same zoning regulations. We still have to comply with all the same design criteria that's required. And we go through and we do that review in depth, whether it's a stick frame project, it's a modular project, or it's a panelized project. It all faces the same criteria and the same design parameters. There usually isn't a difference in the requirements between a off-site construction and an on-site construction, because in the end, what you're really looking at this stage is making sure your building meets the character that you're trying to get for the neighborhood. So I wanted to point out there isn't any special changes for the off-site construction when it comes to these projects. So in the end of the day, they will look just like every other building. It's just a few changes on the internal portion of it. I wanted to look at a conceptual site plan and start to talk a little bit about some of the site planning exercises. It's a very similar site plan to what everything else goes on, but there's a few other additional criteria we have to consider that usually ends up leaving larger spaces available on a site. For example, we have to plan for large spaces for cranes to be able to be set and modules to be able to be set on site. And then once those are set, we can come back and we can landscape that and leave more open public space to the area, as opposed to just developing edge to edge and filling the setbacks as much as possible. So we can leave more of that open space in between the edges as we're working through, because we have to plan for those activities to occur. In terms of the building design, this is kind of where we get back to the volumetric modular. It works most efficient when we start talking about a box-like design that comes together in a series of boxes put together. So we really look at that and try to determine what the most efficient practice is in order to get to the most unique design at the end of the day. We're usually trying to do about 12 by 70 foot boxes, give or take. And then we're trying to put those together side by side in order to form our buildings. It's a slightly different approach from how a stick-built project comes together. But the idea is that we're looking at it from the lens of knowing it's going to be modular, and we know that because of that, there are constraints we have to fit in and plan our units around that kind of design. So with that, there's plenty of opportunity for articulation and design. We can do anything from pulling out whole sections of floor so we can get up to a 12-foot articulation in depth. We can change the length and width of the boxes so we can get different appearances across the board, and that ends up getting a jog-like appearance on the outside. We could cut holes in the outside so you could get a kind of covered porch perspective and get a sense of depth and avoid a solid facade look. And we can even take whole sections and turn them 90 degrees. All of those come at the cost of some slight efficiency, but at the end of the day, we can provide opportunities in order to provide a difference of design that isn't your standard floor-to-ceiling cube with solid planes on every direction. Could even offset the massing so that it's not a rectangular top. We can do offset appearances between the levels as well. Now, structurally, there is a slight difference in what we have to consider. There is some space that ends up being used by the structure that isn't actually occupiable, and that comes down to the process of how the buildings are set and put together. Because these are craned in using a large crane, we have to be able to remove those straps, and so there's usually about a 2-inch space in between the modules themselves, and that allows us to extract those straps. But because of that, you end up with slightly thicker walls, and you end up with some slightly unused space on the interior, but you trade that off for the speed of construction and the speed of setting that you're working on as well. That occurs at the mate lines on the plans in between each module. It also occurs in the floor and ceiling. Because we have to build a ceiling and a floor in order to get a continuous cube for structural nature, we have a ceiling and a floor that exists separately per building, and so we have a slightly taller service area between levels, And the intention of that is that everything can be plumbed and wired all within the same module, and it reduces the need for those trades to be on the site to be able to make those kind of connections. In theory, the units come together and you have small patches inside of them, and you're just doing small patchwork on site, so you have a lot less rough carpentry and overall construction work that's going on. And that's supported by these elements that allow us to do as much as we can within the factory as a self-contained unit. From a transportation perspective, these are usually an oversized load. They're usually about 12, 16, or 18-foot widths, so they're larger than most traffic lanes are. And so you have to consider that portion from a transportation perspective. You're transporting each of those modules independently because of their size. So it takes a little bit more transport on the road, a few more pilot cars, and some potential traffic concerns that come up with that. But again, with that, you get the speed of construction on your site, and you'll get a higher quality of construction because of what the factory is able to build and do. Generally, those boxes come out about 12 feet wide, 70 feet long, 10 to 12 feet tall, depending on what's happening. We have to keep in mind that they're going on the back of trailers, so we have about 3 feet in height that we lose out of that. But the reality is anything that we don't actually manage to get in the module, we can certainly get put on site, and just has to be constructed attached to it. And so we can do some things outside of that cubic limitation as well. The storage of the modules, you have to take those 12 by 70 by 12 foot modules and store them somewhere on the site. That gets back into that site planning exercise where you're talking about figuring out how to store those elements. They can be on site, which is usually best to be able to feed the large crane and be able to keep the project moving at a quick pace. Or you can store them off-site as well. You just have to be able to truck them in and be able to work with them on site. Ultimately, they just need to be able to get on the site to your crane and then be able to be set on your building. It's a fairly large amount of space that it can take, but you can use that for other purposes once the building is done. From there, we have the crane. These are fairly large 50-foot cranes that have to have outriggers on them. So it takes a fairly large footprint on the site to be able to work. They also have overhead concerns because of their height. They can't work near electrical lines. So we have to be cognizant of that as we're planning for the building location and we're planning for how the building is put together. All of that starts to come into play as we start to design the whole structure. And then you've got your traffic concerns because of the fact that these are the large objects moving around from a factory to your site. Factories are usually not close to the projects. So you're usually trucking in for 50, 60, couple hundred miles, depending on how close your factory is to your project. And so you have to kind of be aware of that as you're designing and working through the project. Because of that, cities will often have portions of roads closed down depending on how the traffic is working through, and depending on the size of the modules that you're needing to work with and the speed that they're working through. However, that is a small change in traffic for a couple of days. While the building is being set. Once the building is set, your traffic actually dies down again because you have less trades on the site, which reduces your traffic coming to the site, which reduces the traffic on the road and makes everyone else a happy camper to avoid the traffic out there. The noise levels is one of the big pluses because all of your rough carpentry and construction is done off-site. You don't have as loud of a project going on in your city center. You don't have people trying to use saws to cut 2x4s in the middle of the day and producing loud noises, some of which can be harmful to the population. All of that noise is handled off-site in a factory, and you don't have to worry about that in your city center. At most, you're usually hearing some screwdrivers and possibly a nail gun for some trim pieces being put together. And with that, you have a much quieter noise. I was actually just out in a job site out in Big Sky, Montana, pulled out my decibel meter app on my phone and was getting about 40 decibels as I was walking around the site. I walked off of the site and it easily drops down to 20 decibels, which is quieter than most whispers. So it's a nice, quiet construction method that you don't have to worry about disrupting everything else in the middle of the day as well. A huge plus as well is there's multiple reviews and inspections. This is a great thing because you get a much higher quality product because multiple people are looking at multiple elements all throughout the process. Everything from the review of the design being done at multiple levels to the inspections in the factory that have to then meet the design that was just reviewed and approved. and the inspections on site, because there usually are two different teams that are reviewing their information, and they're reviewing different elements at different points. Because of that, your project is more scrutinized and the details put together, and so you end up with a better quality product at the end because of the level of detail you get into. The environmental control is a huge plus as well, because you can keep building all throughout the year. You don't have to worry about snow causing issues to your structural system that can potentially compromise it. These are often built inside of closed warehouse factories, and so they're climate controlled, and you don't have to worry about temperature differences or climate issues going on outside. Your factory can continue to produce the same construction throughout the year, even while it's snowing. Additionally, because these portions are being built smaller and smaller, off-site, you don't have as many height concerns, so you're usually not having as many safety violations for people being able to do the work, because the scale of the work is done much smaller. You can put the roof on a 30-story building 10 feet off the ground because your roof is 10 feet off the ground instead of 30 when it's in the factory. Those are kind of some of the key elements to think about when it comes to the factory construction and the implications they have on the public as well. And then I wanted to wrap it up by just summarizing those benefits. The noise is a huge benefit, to be able to reduce that in the middle of your city throughout the day. The speed of construction is astonishing, because you can build your foundation at the same time you're building your modules in a factory. You can speed up the production period of your design into a matter of a couple of months and get both of those done. And then when it comes to setting, you can enclose the building in a couple of days, rather than taking weeks to build floors and sheathe it and close it in. And then finally, the other one is the quality that comes out of it at the end of the day. Those multiple inspections and multiple reviews are hugely important in order to get that increased quality coming out of it. With that said, I believe that ends my portion of the presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Cam here.
I'm really glad we asked Alex to come, because he speaks very, very well, and he uses much bigger words than I do, so I appreciate that. My name's Cam Algardsen. I am general manager of Irontown Modular. Sorry, that's hopefully not too loud. We're a modular factory located here in Spanish Fork. In my bio, it said I'm a fourth generation modular builder, which sounds like a long time, and it is. In the 1950s, my grandpa and his dad, who was a carpenter, decided to take an old sugar beet factory in Provo and build some cabins there that they were building for the Forest Service. They got tired of driving up and down the canyon, and back then the cars and trucks weren't nearly as safe and fast as we have now, nor were the roads better. So they thought, well, let's build these off-site. And so they got an old beet factory, and they built several mods in there. And that's how the fourth generation comes in. My dad started the business currently in its current form 40 years ago. And I'm the lucky one that gets to carry the torch forward. So I'm happy to be here today, and I'm passionate about modular construction. That's a funny thing to be passionate about, but it's something that I think has a lot of potential that's unrealized. I don't think we are utilizing the off-site capabilities that exist in the industry. So I'm hoping to educate on that today. And also, I know we're going to hold questions to the end, but I think it might be a little easier to, if you do have one, just raise a hand and we'll try to answer it. So let's talk about what it is. Now, Alex laid a great groundwork there for what is modular construction. I'll tell you what it's not. We're not talking about RVs. There's a couple of buttes right there. We're not talking about tiny homes on wheels. Anybody who watches HGTV falls in love with these shows. We're talking about tiny houses on wheels. We're also not talking about panelization. So panelized units are flat. They're often open stud. In some cases, they're closed. But that's a panelized building. We're not talking about panelization. There's some pretty awesome things happening. I've actually visited some factories where they actually put the siding on the outside, the drywall on the inside, they paint them. and those enclosed panels are great. You can see there's a roof being built on the floor and craned into place. That's not exactly what we're talking about right now. We're talking about volumetric construction, and it's definitely not whatever this is. I don't think that meets zoning requirements. So what is it? And I'll breeze through this, but it's equal or better quality than site built. And I say equal to because site built's got some pretty nice stuff, but often we exceed site built construction in quality. And the reason we do that is because we have to move them with cranes. We can pick units up and put them over trees, 100-foot trees with a crane and swing them up in the air. You don't want a shoddily built building if you're going to be handling that way. So we build them very rugged, much more durable than a site-built single-family home would be. We also are building to the IRC and IBC codes. Those are the site-built codes. This building was built to IBC. I have the same code in my factory. They are regulated by states a lot of times because we do interstate travel. We do inter-town and inter-city travel as well. And so we need to have, the higher that regulatory umbrella is, the easier it is to flow between our service areas. So there's a lot of state programs. Utah actually just created one. We're hoping for it to be live next month. The legislature finally got behind that due to the benefits of modular construction. Okay, and we're talking about permanent buildings here. So pros and cons, Alex mentioned quite a few of them. And I won't read all of those, but the laydown side, if anybody's ever done any building, it spreads. Building is kind of like your uncle that comes over to watch the football game, and he spreads and takes over the whole couch. And that's kind of what construction jobs do. They kind of spread out. When we're in a modular method, we can come in and we spread out for a day or two. We take up the road, we put some barricades up, and we stack the building. And then we've just quantum leaped ahead in the schedule. So we don't have nearly the space requirements or the time requirements that are there. Critical path is shortened. I can build, if you take a typical site-built home in the neighborhood, in the area here, your fast builds are about 9 to 10 months. Some production builders are going a little faster than that. Typically, they're over a year. We can put one in the ground in about 4. You spend some time putting the foundation in, about a month with the foundation, month and a half, 2 months, and then we can place the mod in 1 day, and then they'll take about a month or two after to finish the mods together, put on any roof seaming, siding seaming, flat work, landscaping, and you're moved in in a shorter period of time. And that can't be overstated how important that is. Time value of money, interest rates are high. The interest expense in a budget is high. If you can chop that in half, that's a huge saving that's often overlooked as we go through the process of analyzing projects. Waste is one I'll mention. In our factory, we've got 60,000 square feet. I've got 26 locations where we're building. If there's an extra 2x4 in Station A, it goes to Station B, and we utilize it. If that extra 2x4 exists in South Jordan, it's really hard to get it down to Lehigh where the other job is. So it gets thrown in the dumpster. So it's inherent in the modular process to reduce our waste. We've got a very effective way to handle it on site. Most of our waste is packaging of materials as they come in. Question?
How do you get the houses from where they're built to where the residents live?
So if the house is built in our factory in Spanish Fork and the house is going to be built in Park City, how do we transport them? So all of our homes are transported on flatbed trailers, semi-trailers. As Alex mentioned, they're huge. They're 16 feet wide, 70 feet long. They're these giant boxes, and so we have to take them on flatbed trailers, and then they're craned onto the foundation and assembled. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'll tell a quick story about that. The question was, do they hold up better to weather events or earthquakes. In the 80s, the Northridge earthquake happened in California, and my dad was running the factory at the time. We had several homes in that earthquake zone. Now back then, we didn't have quite as many structural requirements to connect the homes. You'd sit them on, you'd toenail them in, and that was it. During that earthquake, entire neighborhoods were condemned. They were falling apart. The homes were not usable. The homes that we actually built and sent down there had slid off the foundations, but were intact, and we're able to reuse those. Now, if you see the hurricane footage in Florida, homes floating down the streets, I can't speak for those, but these will stay intact. They go through a lot, and they're built very durably. So good questions. Okay, some of the site-built cons I've talked about. Make sure I got that. Management's very easy for us. It's easy for us. The construction site is right in our building, so it's very simple to make changes, make adjustments, record what we're doing. So those are all really good things. And then also, most of the modular industry is not unionized. We're a manufacturer, and the Davis-Bacon laws are primarily site-focused. So there's some cost benefits there over site building as well. Some of the modular cons, I'll talk about this briefly and not emphatically, are it's a little abnormal. It's kind of on the edge. A lot of people don't know about it. And believe it or not, trust trumps numbers. Even if the numbers are good, if you don't trust the process, they won't move forward. Okay? And that's one thing that I'm trying to do, and we're trying to do as an industry, is increase the knowledge and education around modular construction so we can trust it more and utilize it more. But it is not our mainstream, and it really needs to be. Okay, design is restricted. We do have to make sure that what we build can go down the road. You'll never see a modular Walmart run out of our factory. They're just a little big to fit down the road. But apartments, offices, homes, ADUs, those are all prime candidates for modular design. There are additional costs that increase it. I told some folks at our table during lunch that we actually are more expensive in cases in lower cost areas. And that's because we do have to transport. We do have to rent a crane. We overbuild the unit. So that doesn't always pencil into lighter construction, direct costs. But the time savings are there, the durability is there, the low neighborhood impact is there. So cost isn't always the deciding factor. Lots of times it's those other things. We build a lot in resort areas where they have a very short building season, such as Park City up in Big Sky, Montana. We're doing some employee housing in Colorado. They are terrified of the first snowflake that comes because it shuts everything down. And so we can prefabricate and shorten down their time frame on site. And I'll let you read a few other of those. If you ever want to come, and we're open to tours down in Spanish Fort, just look us up, and you're welcome to come through and tour through the factory. But we can pre-assemble the units, then break them apart for shipment. This is an example of a pre-assembled unit. We want to make sure it fits before it goes. We have some unique processes in the factory. We have cranes, we have lifts. We build things out of sequence a little bit because we don't have weather to deal with. We don't have to get it dried in so we can drywall. Actually, the roof's one of the last things to go on when we're building in the factory. But you'll see some innovative things. Don't often see a bunch of guys standing next to a roof on a concrete slab, but that's what it looks like in the shop. And we're able to move walls around, prefabricated. We can actually build inside out. We don't do this in our factory. I'd like to get to that point, but that's not currently how we build. A lot of our industry actually builds the drywall on the walls first, and then adds in the insulation, the wiring and plumbing after. So we can do some innovative things. Craning is always fun. Everybody loves craning. Diane here is one of our customers, and she was there when we flew her house in the air, and she was crossing her fingers with a little nervous because you're putting a lot of money on some very tiny little straps and cables. But it's exciting to fly those units in and place them. This is one we actually did up in Deer Valley. This was a custom home And this is a good example of hybrid construction. The lower level is all site-built. It's a hillside lot, and the upper floor was modular. Oops, wrong button. So residential categories, I've mentioned some of those, custom, semi-custom. We work a lot in rural areas, production subdivisions. ADUs is something I want to talk about a little more later, but townhomes, apartments, recreational cabins. And I'll flip through some of these. I got a lot of slides. Dave was a little nervous because my slide deck was kind of fast. So I said, I got a lot of pictures, Dave. I'll flip through them fast. But there's some of the possible things that we can do. I mean, there's some really neat architecture that can be done. We're not just talking about shoe boxes. And actually, we're not even only talking about the modern aesthetic. These guys are modern. We like them because they're flat. But you can do pitched rows in sections. You can hinge rows. There's lots of different opportunities, architecturally speaking. And the quality level that we're going to get can be quite high. This home's probably worth about $4 million up in Deer Valley, up at the top of Deer Valley. That's an old town historic district in Park City we did a few years back. They must have been Green Bay Packers fans due to the colors that we're seeing there. Okay, but I just want to show you that. Now, as we get into apartments and townhomes, that's where you can really, there's a lot of concern. You've seen the container ships floating through the ocean with all those boxes strapped together, floating along on the waves. Nobody wants to live in a stack of cubes, but we can do some amazing architectural things. Alex is an expert at this. Bryant is an expert at making these things look attractive, usable, a very attractive addition to the city skyline. Townhomes and apartments, hotels, it's all there. As we get into the commercial realm, you can go up to 5 stories currently under the building code. A lot of time that's done over a podium, so if you're going for an urban infill, you can build on a very small piece of land. We've done vacation cabin communities. There's even high-rise hotels happening in some urban areas. Seattle did a 26-story hotel. It was produced in Poland, and it was shipped all the way to Seattle and erected there. So all steel construction, as you can imagine. Gas stations, restaurants, oil change. Jiffy Lube had a bunch of their buildings built modularly. It's a little different. It's steel construction, but there's a lot of opportunities here. And once we talk about permanent relocatable versus relocatable, offices and schools are very commonly used. The classrooms that we used growing up are in this category as well. And really the bottom dot there, pretty much anything you can think of can be built as long as it can fit down the road. Some of these things, they're not pretty, they're temporary, and those are what people think of when they get to modular. But then you get some really interesting, amazing buildings that can be built in this manner. Really beautiful stuff. That's actually a classroom in northern part of the Bay Area. There's a company that Project Frog is their name, and they build innovative modular classrooms. So some pretty neat stuff out there. This is a little project we did in Yosemite. These were nightly rental cabins that were done for a resort there, Four Diamond Resort. And they wanted a cabin in the woods experience for their clients. So trying to build in that environment in a short time frame was an impossibility. It would have taken 3 seasons to build this community. But since we're able to prefabricate, we could do it in 1. And also 4 season, if you notice, there's a summer and a winter. We'll build to 300-pound snow loads that can be utilized year-round. That can all come out of the factory as well. High quality finishes. We've done a lot of hospitality work they're going after a luxurious experience for their clients, and that's certainly possible in the factory as well. So some pretty neat projects over the years. This is one we did in Jackson Hole. It's a bed and breakfast, a historic bed and breakfast that wanted a hotel. They wanted to add that hotel. So as planners, you guys deal with citizen blowback a lot of times, and that's a factor in approving projects. This one was built on Broadway. 2 blocks away from the town square. High traffic, very, very resort town, very short season in the summer. And so they were very concerned about laydown. We're able to stack this thing up in 2 days and then pulled right back out of the road, and they just had a 5-foot fence around the whole thing. So that would have been a lot longer experience otherwise. And you can see some of the finishes that are there. This is one we did in Moab. It's retail on the bottom floor, and the upper floor is all employee housing. So it's a mixed-use project. Really cool finishes, barnwood. Bryant loved this one. He likes this stuff. Employee housing units, I could go on, and I'm trying to flip through there quickly. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Employee housing, sorry. It's my Provo accent getting away from me. That's a good question. So a lot of projects are built in. A lot of cities have unionized their labor force, and that increases the cost, the labor cost for those projects. So when we build in a factory, we are not building to the Davis-Bacon Act rules and don't have to do a prevailing wage. We just do local to the factory wage. So if we're building in Utah, going down to the Bay Area where it's union labor rates for most of the production, we have a big edge in cost because we can build here rather than there. Right. Yeah, local fair. Actually, I think last time I checked Davis-Bacon wages in Utah, we're actually there for Utah, but we don't have to build under California's. So, was there another hand? We don't, but we really dislike anything coming from overseas that's really hard to work with. So we often get asked to purchase things from China because it's a smoking deal. And every time we have, it's been a lot of regret. So we try not to do that. Okay, so I wanted to chat a little bit about accessory dwelling units. This is something works very well with modular. We primarily, I'm not going to spend a lot of time defining them. Everybody knows what they are. It's been talked about a lot. But we actually are a detached ADU builder. So we produce a lot of ADUs out of our factory, several hundred over the last few years, that can be dropped into a backyard. And there's a very big benefit to our communities to use ADUs as part of our solution to the housing crisis. Okay, I've got some stats up there that talk about the shortages. At current rates, we're not even going to produce enough to keep up. We can't produce land fast enough to keep up with our housing needs. If we start talking about the requirements, the challenges that are in front of us, we're talking about labor shortages, land scarcity. ADUs are a really attractive way to help. Okay, they're severely misunderstood and underutilized in part of our solution. Okay, so the American Planning Association, I'm going to quote the Planning Association that we're here with. They all have the potential to increase affordability and create a wider range of options within the community. They enable seniors to stay in their family and facilitate better use of the housing fabric. Our housing fabric is spreading. Our densities, our occupants per house in our older parts of our towns is shrinking. People are moving out to taking their families to new homes. And we've got a lot of space in there, a lot of capacity that we're not utilizing. ADUs will do that. I'm going to skip over that in the interest of time. So when we talk about housing costs, what really brings housing costs down? Or any cost of anything down? Anybody want to answer that? Economies of scale, thank you. The car, when it first came out, the Model T, the very first landmark of mass production, cost a year's salary. That's what the Model T cost back in 1920. The cell phone would be a tremendously expensive thing to own if it were not for economies of scales. Computers the same way. Okay, mass production is the answer. Problem is, mass producing homes requires we mass produce lots. We're all in this business. I'm on a planning commission in Salem right now. It's pretty hard to mass produce lots. Getting through entitlements, getting through financing, getting everything done so we can mass produce them. So I'm going to jump to the end here. Okay, land is our challenge. Okay. It's the most difficult thing to procure, the most scarce, and the most expensive part of our budget. Okay, and the ADU solution, the land's procured. It exists, it's improved, it's ready. It's sitting right there. It's not scarce. There's millions of buildable lots in our country we're not tapping into. And land expense can be as low as $0. Okay, the reason I am interested in it and am passionate about it is because they are really modular friendly. We built several hundreds in the last few years out of our factory. We can build a unit less expensively, truck it over, crane it in, and put it in the backyard in a matter of a few weeks rather than a few months. We can consolidate all of that labor, that vertical construction labor, into our four walls. And that gets us into the economies of scale that we're looking for. Currently, there are 4 of us in the state that are doing ADUs. Go ahead.
I have a question. When you do projects, you do everything from foundation, platform, finish.
Good question. The question was, do we do everything? Turnkey. Typically, we do not. We focus on our strength, which is our factory. Now, within a 1-hour drive of our shop, we will offer turnkey service. Yep, we'll subcontract the out-of-factory items. Another question?
Do you have an idea how homeowners are financing this, where they've got a mortgage on the property already, and then you finance the construction of the ADU?
Good question. Yeah, questions about financing. How do you finance an ADU? So ADUs are, if years ago when rates were dropping, cash out refi was the answer because you wanted a better rate than you had. On the way back up, nobody wanted to refinance. They had those 3% rates. They didn't want to touch their primary mortgage. So the answer is cash or HELOC or a second mortgage, tapping into the equity of the home they have. And that's still the case. There's very few options outside of a second mortgage to finance an ADU right now. Good questions. Oh, another one? We have begun that. We've been mostly focused out of state because Utah has not been a big difference in cost for us, whereas it is in other areas. That's where our company's gone. In recent months, with the legislative movements, political movements that are going on with housing, we feel like there may be some opportunities to work with cities. We've actually had Farmington City there. They've got some innovative things happening. Santaquin was there this week to visit our shop. And so we're in Spanish Fort. Dave's the planner there. He's ADU through and through, right, Dave? He wrote it on his car in a big marker, so I think that means he's all for it. But yes, we are working on that right now. We feel like there's a good opportunity. Okay, and I don't want to spend. I'd like to allow some time for questions, so I'm going to jump to make a quick statement about the future. The future of modular is really now. There's some amazing things happening overseas. All of these pictures are other factories and other projects in other countries. The U.S. is behind. We are not leading in offsite construction. I think we could, but we're in our own way in a lot of ways. Okay, so anyway, we're hoping to educate. We're hoping to open some minds and to help increase understanding. But with that, we'd like to take some questions.
I was wondering in your, with modular designs, how many of those you're producing on a larger scale that have accessible features in them, wide entry bathrooms, turnaround space, and zero-step entrances. As we're looking at an aging population, those are, as is on the city side, trying to incentivize those types of products for ADUs specifically. Just wondering if that's something that you're incorporating in designs.
Yeah, so I can speak towards that one. Generally speaking, we do have to consider accessibility across the board, especially when these come off of public funds. There's accessibility attached to those. Generally, developers are looking into some, I'll say, aging in place metrics that start to consider some of those metrics outside of accessibility, like the zero threshold shower, for example. Those kind of things come up all the time. It's usually more of a developer by developer approach to them, as opposed to a design driven. In a perfect world, most units are designed as what's called a Type B version, in which case it can actually be converted into those accessibility functions and add that facility into it, but doesn't necessarily have to occur on day one. So at least in EV Studio, everything that we've designed to date has been a Type B function. We usually do it on the ground floor because that's where we see the most accessibility. But in theory, we could take a third floor apartment and we have all the blocking elements in place for grab bars. We have the construction considerations for a zero threshold shower to be able to be installed in that. And we do take considerations into wheelchair accessibility and making sure we have those large bathrooms for that space to work.
Go ahead, shout it out.
So, how do modular homes relate to building permits? So, do you have to wait for the city you're transporting your modular home to approve the building permit before you start construction in the factory? Yeah. Sorry, I stuttered so much.
No problem. It depends on the municipality in many cases. If the state has a program in place, for instance, California, the module side of the process is approved, plan review, it goes through the state, and so does the inspection process. And that happens before usually the local municipality can take it on, and they take basically the approved plan set, and then they'll do their review outside of what's factory constructed. So they'll evaluate the on-site elements, and anything related to planning and zoning is also part of that. So yes, the review process is usually very similar depending on the location. In Utah, it usually is just through the normal process through the local municipality. There isn't a state program that's in place for that. So it's generally the same as site construction.
So one other point too about approvals, often the building permit is not dependent on the building itself, the modular building portion of the building. So as long as we've got a building department approval on the plans, we can start in the factory and get a jump on the project. Often the city is waiting for additional information to give it. There's additional paperwork for posting bonds. There's additional departments that aren't related to the modular portion that may take weeks or even months to do. So in the case where we're trying to get a jump on the project, we will start as soon as that building department's cleared us to go ahead with the building. That adds to the time savings that can happen.
Or the state, the state.
Hi, I have a question. You mentioned that the cost really comes down when you reach economies of scale, which means that a lot of the cost benefits of building modular go to developers who are building apartments, condos, townhomes, whatever it is. But have you seen any examples of communities that have been able to successfully encourage developers to pass those cost savings on to residents, renters, or homeowners? Because as somebody already asked, this could be a really great opportunity for our moderate income housing and affordable housing crisis that we're having. But a lot of the benefits, because of that economy scale, aren't really being passed on to those who could really use them.
So I can say yes, that is a function that's out there. I work with a group out of Colorado that's doing workforce housing in the area. They get a lot of grants and elements from the public in order to help drive down the cost. But I can say that I've seen the house that they're selling sell for, I think it was $320,000 is what they're selling it for. I've seen the same house go with other developers for $625,000. So I can say that does pass through to the client at the end of the day. Oftentimes, those same homes, if they were stick-built, would probably actually end up being million-dollar homes just based on the area and the local workforce in the area. That helps to drive down the cost, which then developers turn around and bring back to the public. I've worked a lot with the workforce housing population, and we do it with apartments, and we're doing it with single-family homes as well. And we do see that savings being passed down.
If I could add to that, so you're talking about, you're mostly talking about a developer who's doing a larger scale project, right? And how's a single consumer going to benefit from that? Well, one thing that we've tried to do as a company is we created a catalog. We used to just do custom jobs, and it wasn't affordable because we'd build it once and that was it. So we've over the years created a catalog that we like to work from. And as we have these 25 plans that are tried and true, been built, we know what the costs are. We don't just think we know what the costs are. We can sell that for less as long as we have enough consumers coming. Now, they don't all have to be one customer. They could be 50 different customers across 50 different towns. If we're building the same product, the cost comes down. Okay, so and we have some clients that are actually, they're kind of a dealer in California, the one I'm talking about. They built several hundred of 3 different plans. That's all they did. And because we could get volume, we could pass that to them, and then they could pass that on. Now, not all developers will. Most won't. They'll keep the profits, okay? And the consumers will pay what they're going to pay through the market. Developers are going to sell it for as much as they can. And if a developer wants to really get rocking and rolling, then they're going to take less money and reinvest it and bring their costs down so they get more volume. It's just a matter of setting the prices according to the speed you want to sell at. Okay, but if we have this base of low-cost product, it allows that to happen. When we don't, it can't happen. Okay, nobody can turn on the juice. We have to stay expensive. So repeatability is a huge factor. And as we talk from the planning perspective, my comment about entitling like an ADU program in cities, for example, if a manufacturer like us could go in and say, okay, well, there's enough cities in this state that are detached ADU friendly, and we can market to that, and we can control our product offering down to a limited amount, then our prices drop over time with volume. So believe it or not, you guys will decide that. If we don't have a marketplace that volume exists, we can't get there. But if the planning community will allow a runway for volume to occur, there's lots of people who want to do it. There's dealers, there's GCs, there's factories. We all want to produce. We want to grow our businesses. That's what the market wants to do. But if we're roadblocked by ordinances or antiquated, and there's not a chance for volume to develop, it won't happen.
And you kind of just addressed this immediately. So in California, you have ADU by right. You've got pre-approved plans at both city, county level across the board. You've got tons of dealers that are entering the market, both on the prefab side. What work are we seeing in Utah, both from your end, from the city end, to do, hey, these are prefab ADU plans, ready to go, approved by city, by county? Like, what work has been done locally to kind of match that model that we're already seeing happen in California, where this is taking off across the board?
Good question. So it really it goes against my grain to ever say we should do what California does. That really makes me feel dirty inside. But they're doing some good stuff, and their mod program is a model. They do not over-regulate. They let I'll just touch on this and then I'll answer your question. In our industry, there's manufacturers, there's third-party regulators who are private, and there's state agencies who are public. A lot of state agencies don't want to use the third-party regulators. They want to go right into the factories themselves. Huge problem, hugely inefficient. We actually got out of Washington State because they will not use a third-party deal. So hurdle number one, hurdle number two, hurdle number three. As California goes through and fixes their super severe problem, they're about 1 million units short. We're 35,000, 38,000 short.
Depends on who you ask.
Depends on who you ask. So they're 10 times bigger, right? We have 3 million, they have 30 million. So commensurately, we're a third of what they are per capita. And so they've got way more incentive to fix their problem. So if we watch what they do well and do poorly, we can learn a lot and then implement on our side. So some of the things that I've seen, which the cities are doing around us, and we really want to publicize this. We have a vested interest. It's my full-time job, right, to run the business and to expand it. Farmington City has had a detached ADU ordinance for 22 years. They have 22 years of brain damage that they've just gone through. And when they started, they said, well, we'll just take it. It's 22 years of baby steps. I actually sat down with the planning director just last week, and he went through all 22 years. It was a very long, boring conversation. But over time, they've gotten up to the point where they've learned and tried and failed, and then got comfortable, and something worked, and they got comfortable again. And then the staff changes, city leadership changes, whatever. But they've gotten where they've gotten. They're actually a model in this ADU space for the rest of the state, and they should be looked at closely by every city. Where they're at is they're all comfortable with the detached ADUs, but they've actually said, let's take it a step further, and let's help our citizens subdivide the land under that ADU and sell it. Now that scares the heck out of most city people. Like, that's crazy. But what it's doing is it's putting an ADU, let's say 400, 600, 1,200. They've got a 800-foot footprint, so you could do 1,600 square feet in a two-story. They've raised their height limits, so you could get a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,600-foot house into a backyard, and you can subdivide the land and sell that off. It's kind of a flag lot. It's not really. It's called a subservient lot. It has an access easement. And that is giving them a sub $300,000 offering for sale in their city. Brand new, came out in June, very innovative, but that's what's happening, okay? And so we see this, we think, well, for us, we're very well suited for that. Let's drop in our mods with cranes and trucks, and they don't want to have 50 job sites going on, building all these ADs. So let's give them an easy way. So the city, right now they're considering allowing us to show a pre-approved ADU plan with a link to our website, so we can connect with their citizens and hopefully build for them. And in that case, we're close enough, we'll do that turnkey, so they don't need to get their own GC, no architects required, pre-approved plans. They go in there, they pay their fees, fill out their application, make sure everything's checked. But that didn't come overnight. That came after 22 years of brain damage. But that's the most advanced I've heard.
Well,
Yeah, I think we're getting close to the end of our hour here. Just out of curiosity, is there anybody from Farmington City with us here? So, you live in, so anybody planning department in Farmington? Great, so planning commission. So there are people in the room that are familiar with what's going on in Farmington. We've asked somebody in our office to figure it out. So we're really curious in Spanish Fork about exactly, what's been done there and to try to figure out if there's something that might be worth mimicking for us. Everybody's interested in providing more opportunities for not just people to have places to live, but home ownership has really become an important issue for our city council. And it seems like Farmington might be onto something. So I just wanted to ask that. Let me ask as well, there was a tour of stack homes a couple of months ago that APA Utah put together. Did anybody in the room go to that by chance? Few of us. That's right, I remember. I think there were about 20 of us all together. Cam mentioned, I've been in Spanish Fork for a while now, so that's given me an opportunity over the years to tour their plant several times. And I could not have been more wrong about what modular housing is, modular construction. What they do in Spanish Fork absolutely blew me away, to the extent that, maybe some of you that have a relationship with your building inspection people, that maybe are privy to some of the arguments that inspectors get into or that we end up getting drug into by way of why home builders need to actually follow the building code. I've been kind of likewise blown away at the willingness that the home building industry has to cut corners and to not just do the fundamentals to the degree that I really don't have any interest in purchasing a product that's being delivered by any of the on-site builders that operate on the Wasatch Front. I would consider buying a modularly constructed product, though. It's just, for me, it's a matter of quality. And I think there's a ton of potential, like Cam has really stressed, in having modular construction be a way to maybe help dig us a little bit out of the hole we're in terms of just supply and demand. So really appreciate everybody being here today. Like I've mentioned a few times, I certainly appreciate these gentlemen. Let's give them a round of applause. Thanks.